I'd like you to answer this question, how are you, in a way that might be a little bit different from the ways we usually do. Like, fine. So one of my teachers, Johan Mosensen, he says, fine, it's an acronym. It stands for fucking incapable of naming emotion. Or, or good, is another one. He says good stands for gloomy, overworked, overtired, and definitely not trusting that you want to hear about it. So the truth is, I do want to hear about it. And I want to hear about it and invite it in a particular way. The way that Marshall Rosenberg, who developed nonviolent communication, he said, this question, how are you, which exists all over the world, what it's actually asking is, what's alive in you? Because when we know what's alive in the other, when I know and can feel and sense what's alive in you, and you can sense what's alive in me, then we're in contact. Then we have connection, which is one of our deepest longings and most basic needs. So I'm putting in the chat here, and I'll put also on Instagram, I put it before, but it's a link to a list of feelings. So I invite you to click on that link and just take a few moments as you drop that question inside of what's alive. And then just see, as your eyes go over those words, see which one grabs you, which one has a sense of resonance when you see, oh yeah, that's it. That's what's alive in me. Let's take a moment. This is a question not so much for thinking, but for feeling. And you might notice there's two sections in this list. One is a section of pleasant feelings. Others is unpleasant feelings.
Danny, a few people are not accessing the link. I noticed the same on my side.
Okay, well, that's very helpful to know. So let me try putting it in this way. Okay, so I'm now putting it in the chat as a document that you can download. It'll take about another 6 seconds. And if you're on Instagram, or if that doesn't work for you, if you just Google feelings inventory, it'll be the first thing that comes up for you. It's so interesting to have an error when trying to access feelings. What does that mean about technology? Okay, so now it's in the chat for you who are on Zoom, and you have also the Google option. Different ways to access feelings. For those of you on Zoom, are you able now to click on it in the chat and download it? Amazing. Okay. So just take a moment to see, when you hear this question, how are you? What is alive? And then just let your eyes go over these words and see which one grabs you. They're all welcome. You're not supposed to be feeling a right way, other than what is right and true for you right now. And once you find, and there might be a few different flavors, once you find one that resonates, just notice that sense of resonance of, oh yeah, that's it. And how is it to have clarity, to know what the name is, the precise name of what it is that's alive in you right now? And you might also notice what happens if you welcome that. If you notice its particular texture or flavor, where it is in the body, what's the kind of energy that's alive in that feeling? The word is probably familiar, but what is the feeling like now? And what happens when you let it be welcomed and actually let it be felt? What does that do to your quality of presence? And then if we had time, what I would like to do is actually to invite each one of you to say out loud, how are you in the word? And we'll have time for that when we're in person. But what I would love is if you write in the chat here on Zoom or on Instagram, just how are you in one word? And then also just see what other people are writing, and see if we can catch the resonance. So the group becomes the resonance body, like a guitar for the string of each person's note of aliveness. Tired, alive, at home, animated. Moved by gratitude. Curious. Wonder. Grateful. Tender. Open. Grateful. Fatigued. Tired. Curious. Maybe as you see and hear other people's feelings, vibrant, quiet, then maybe you catch a flavor of resonance of, oh yeah, that's true for me too. Restless, tired, annoyed, blossoming, hungry, grateful, yeah. Delighted. Yeah. And what you might notice also, just as you've shared and presenced yourself in one word, and also as your witness, worried, curious, or as your witness to other people's feelings, to how other people are in a way which isn't just fine, but actually a more precise sharing, expectant, what does that do to your sense of presence? What does it do to your sense or your sense of the connection with others or with this shared group space? Do you notice any shift from before you and others shared? Just raise your hand if you notice any shift. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And if you want to just open your mic, maybe we'll hear from one person or two people. What does that do?
It makes I, Danny, and everyone, it makes everyone more real somehow.
Right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love the way that you say that, Rita. It makes people more real.
Yeah.
It's like that person that was just an image before, it adds humanness to them. We can feel each other more. Yeah, and they're serene. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? One more person?
Well, I can say that I feel more grounded in my presence because I acknowledge what's present.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So just by acknowledging what's present, by giving it a word, and perhaps also by integrating it so it's not just present in you, but others know that. It's like now we are each known in the truth of this moment with each other. That has a grounding and an integrating impact. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. For me, there's actually a deep healing in just that small practice, which is that whereas for much of my life, I lived two lives. One life was the life inside, and the other life was the life outside, the life of interaction. And there was a lot of isolation in not having the experience that I can actually bring my authenticity, my honesty, my vulnerability, and that can create connection, that can support presence. Yeah, where then the words that are coming out of my mouth are alive with the vibration of what's happening inside, and that actually creates intimacy. Maybe you've heard this saying that intimacy is into me you see. And that's what happens when we are precise around what's going on inside. Without many words, with just one word, perhaps we can create intimacy. So it's also this practice of really developing and enriching a vocabulary of experience. so that we can give precise words to what's alive inside, so that when we want, we don't always have to, but when we want, we can open that doorway or that window for connection, or we can create that with others. So we can be in that resonance or in that intimacy, the not two-ness of being alive together. Okay. And then just notice that breath that comes by itself, and like to follow that, slowing down a bit now, having landed a bit together. And feeling inside myself the vibrancy and the richness of being in touch with life. And also this orientation I love of not rushing the communication, but attuning to what is the pace, like in this moment, what is the pace of speaking or of being quiet, which allows me to stay in touch with myself and with you. Maybe you know this experience of, like it's a rush to get it all out before the attention goes away, or somebody's speaking to you and you don't have the sense that they're actually aware of your presence and they're just spitting it out at you. And for me, it's this really interesting practice of what happens when I stay really in touch with being listened to, with there being someone or a group here, and then see how does communicating come? How does relating come? So it's coming in response to you being here. Does it resonate? Yeah, great. Okay, so I want to share a few things with you. Actually, before I share a few things with you, I would love it if you would share with me why you're here, why you tuned in to this session, what it is that you would love to experience, to learn, to hear, to know more about, what you would love to learn or grow in as regards communication or relationships in your life. So you could just write that in the chat or in the comment. So many things, aren't there? Yeah. See some of you making movements like you're typing, so I'll give you another moment to speak and listen from a place of authenticity and connection. Yes, being a better person every day for you and others. Yes. How to connect others with a peaceful and a loving way, healing through communication because you love people. Yeah. Love it. Okay. Welcome to Keep Them Coming. Yeah. Stop the outside life and give time to you. Amen. Feeling and knowing more about NVC. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So as we go along, there's if you like, do you ever have this experience where it just feels very vulnerable to be sharing things and not knowing how other people are experiencing what you're saying? Does anybody know that? Okay, so I'm not alone. So I want to invite you, if you like, if at any point you hear me or somebody say something that you appreciate or that you celebrate, you can go like this with your hands to show that. Or if you hear somebody say something and you're like, I know that experience, then you can go like this. This shows us like, oh yeah, me too. Me also. I know that one. For me, it's so helpful seeing those, kind of getting those resonances, it's like, oh, you're with me. And what I love about it also when I'm doing it for others is it's a way to offer some feedback without interrupting, just to offer that kind of impulse of resonance. So you're welcome to do that. The last one for now is like this. This is like I'm mourning or touched with a kind of sadness if I hear something that stimulates mourning in me, and I want to acknowledge that. And this one is just, it touches my heart. Okay, so I would like to invite you into a little experiment. You're welcome to close your eyes if you're not driving or crossing the street, and or to keep your eyes open if you prefer. And just think about somebody who you interact with on a regular basis. Now, imagine this person walking towards you, and without any words or without any physical contact, you can just sense that they're coming to convince you that they're right and you're wrong. And as you sense them approaching you in this way, coming to convince you, just notice what happens in your body. Notice what happens in your mind, in your heart, in the space between the two of you, and in your anticipation of how the interaction will unfold. Okay. Now, we'll come back to that in a moment. Just open your eyes for a second and show me with your body what happened. What happens when you imagine that person? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like closing down, defensive, preparing for some kind of clash, or protecting yourself, tension. Yeah, you can go ahead and write in the chat if you like, defensive. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Irritated. Yeah. Anxious. Isn't it amazing how that happens without them even saying anything? Just we pick up on that intention. Yeah. Okay. So now close your eyes again. This time, shake that off or edit undo or something. And now imagine the same person approaching you, but this time, again, without any words, without any physical contact, you can just sense in the way that they approach you, that they hold your needs and their needs with care. And when you sense them approaching you and holding your needs and their needs with care, notice this time what happens in the body. Notice what that does in the heart and in the mind and in the space between you. Notice now how you're anticipating the interaction will unfold, even before the first word is exchanged, but just from this approach. Tranquility, it gets warm, relaxation, smiling, flow. Okay. Open chest. Yeah. Now, softness, relaxed, beautiful. I'm loving and celebrating the interaction. Smoothness, openness, relaxation. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Joy. Yeah. So just take a moment and think for yourself these two different ways of relating. Where is the first one familiar from your day-to-day interactions? In which relationships, which topics, which places? And where is the second one familiar? The second one I see also brings more harmony, respect, relief. Yeah, the first one is familiar from work. Second with friends. Yeah. And how many of you would welcome a very clear map about how to navigate more in the direction of the second one, or to know how to get from the first one to the second one, just by show of hands? Bit of a leading question, I know. So, yeah. And another question. How many of you find yourselves on a day-to-day basis trying to convince someone of something, including perhaps yourselves? Very interesting. Because in that first example, I didn't say imagine someone coming to fight with you, did I? I just said, imagine someone coming to convince you that they're right and you're wrong. This is not like, a street fight. So what is that about? Now, do any of you happen to know what is the root of the word convince? So the word convince comes from the Latin word for conquer. And as such, maybe it's less surprising that it has that flavor then of a fight. It's a kind of fractal of that energy or that intention. It's a kind of power struggle. It's a kind of power over. I'm coming and I want you to submit to what I want. That actually comes from a place of scarcity, of not trusting that you would actually be caring or responsive if I just let you in on what's important to me. That's the tragedy and the trauma. And then an understanding of nonviolent communication and various research that's actually been going on for 7 or 8 or 10,000 years with patriarchy, that we relate in this power over kind of way because we've lost touch with the flow of care. And now, as we're trying to convince ourselves and other people on a daily basis, are you aware as you're approaching in that way that you're actually likely stimulating a fight, flight, or freeze reaction in the other person or in yourself? And is that actually what you want? Is that what we want to be doing? Is that really going to serve our purpose? And even let's say you succeed and you convince the other person, and maybe you have an example in mind when it worked. How good does it feel when they give in? When they say, yeah, you're right, I was a jackass, or yeah, fine, you're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. I was wrong, you're right. Is that really what we're longing for? Maybe it's better than nothing, but does that really fill the heart? Is that really it? I don't think so either. I think what we're longing for is much more along the lines of that second example. Is actually that the person would care about what's important to us and then want to give, want to partner, want to collaborate because they get it and they hold it with care. What's happening here is the different operating systems of the nervous system are being stimulated or triggered in different ways. And that what we're realizing is actually our habitual ways of relating that almost everybody I know in the mainstream culture is socialized into has us on an everyday basis communicating and relating in ways which trigger fight, flight, and freeze and make care so rare that it seems like it's available only on special occasions or in certain situations, as opposed to just an everyday possibility that's the way we go about life, being touched by what matters to people and people being touched by what matters to us and wanting to help wanting and enjoying helping each other get our needs met in a way that then life flourishes. And the giving is from not giving in, but giving to and being given to. And how would life be like if we could just have that 10 or 15% more, or in one or a few of our main relationships, if that possibility felt like that's what happens most of the time. So that's really what nonviolent communication is about. It's about making that the neighborhood that we live in, rather than that we just take vacations in on rare special occasions. That's our neighborhood. We're at home in that way of being with others and with ourselves. And even when things don't work out the way that we wish, that we have a way of holding that lands in the lap of care. So people often get confused by what is nonviolent communication? Oh, that's all of those people who are physically abusing themselves and their spouses, they should learn that. But I don't hit anybody or I don't shout very often. What do I need that for? But actually what's meant by violent in nonviolent communication is anything that takes us away from that flow of giving and receiving, that any place where we try and get ourselves or others to do something not out of choice and giving. So all of the games of shame and of guilt tripping and of shoulding on ourselves, oh, if you were really a good partner, if you really cared about me, or I should be more generous, all of those ways of trying to mobilize us to action, not by being touched by life and wanting to give, but by this kind of power over. Nonviolent communication is the way that we come back from that into our tender humanness. So the way I like to say it, and really the way that I teach, is focusing on how do we create the quality of connection where bodies and hearts can relax together? How do we create the quality of connection where bodies and hearts can relax together or dance and play together? Learning the habitual ways of thinking, of relating and communicating and responding that take us away from that, and learning the ways that we can get back from it or stay in it to begin with, even when the other person is coming at us in one of those more difficult or prickly ways. That's where we're navigating to. I'll just slow down and pause for a moment and let that resonate. That prospect, that possibility, where bodies and hearts can relax together. And to live inside the sense that we're on the same team. That giving and being given to isn't something only for birthdays and Christmas, but part of the blessing of being alive together. It touches me, just to say that and to know that that is eminently possible. It's real. It does, for many of us, require an unlearning and a new learning and a training. But in a sense, it's just an activating of a possibility which lives inside us as a result of evolution. That actually it's what's natural when we feel safe with each other. That when we feel safe, and that means we're not in the fight, flight, freeze, and in the scarcity, then it's the most human thing, the most human thing to care and to enjoy caring and being cared for. Yeah, lovely. And it's lovely for me just to be sharing this with you now and sensing your resonance and feeling you and feeling you feeling me. And that's already a gift for me. Yeah. Oh, there's like so much. I'm just looking at the time and like, oh, there's I want to hear you and I want to share more, and there's 21 minutes left, and so I'm glad that this is just an introduction, and I'm looking forward to more time. I would love to hear just one person, anyone who feels moved to respond to what I'm saying, just so I can hear you a bit. You can also write in the chat at any time, and then I'll share a bit more what I want to share. Yeah, Rita, please.
Thank you so much. And you said something about feeling safe with each other, but I found myself thinking, shouldn't we, shouldn't. Yeah, anyway, I will keep going. Shouldn't we first feel safe within ourselves in order to be able to feel safe in that interaction?
I want both of them. Yeah, and for me, I think maybe you're pointing to. Then tell me if I'm understanding you. Like when you feel safe inside yourself, it's easier to feel at ease with others. Is that it?
Yes, somehow, and also so that you can trust that you can connect from a safe place. You need to feel safe about yourself, that you can care for yourself and for your needs, right? My point is, how can I receive others' needs and feelings without losing the presence to my own needs and feelings? That's what I think about feeling safe is, or I feel unsafe when I lose touch with my own feelings and needs. So, and in communication is a little bit like, I feel most of, or many times that I go to the other's place and lose touch with my, or presence to my own.
Yeah. Anybody else have that experience of focusing more on others and their needs and giving up on your own? Yeah. Okay. So we're in good company here. And that's also, it's part of this scarcity mentality that we learn. It makes sense maybe at a much younger age. It's part of our intelligence when our needs are not being honored and included. And the way we learn how to have connection is by focusing on other people's needs. But the scarcity of, oh, either your needs or my needs. And it's, for me, it's related, as I really like to think about dialogue, like when we're exploring connection, as having two stages. The second stage is, what are we going to do? And that's usually the one that people skip to. You want to go to the beach, I want to stay at home, you know. And then it's like, oh, well, what are we going to do? Okay, well, if I want to have connection, then I have to do what you want to do. Or somebody's got to compromise, and then it doesn't feel so good. And that's the problem when we skip straight to what to do. So I say there's two stages, and that's the second stage. And the first stage is just connecting. Not yet deciding what are we going to do, but just connecting, well, what is it that's important to you? And allowing myself to be connected with about what is it that's important to me. It's like I'm really longing for togetherness, you know, or for feeling alive. And going to the beach is one way to feel alive, but we could also sit at home and have, you know, really quality time focusing on each other. So, but it's not so much important that we find the solution. What is it? The magic happens when we just focus on stage one of connecting on the level of deeper needs or longings, which are not limited to one particular action. And that's where the spaciousness can open up. Because we're not deciding what to do, it's safe to allow myself to open to what you want and for you to open to what I want in the heart. Once we're there, then images might just start coming to mind of what feels good together. Or it might be like, oh, I'm actually moved, and then my willingness shifts in a way which isn't about compromise. It's like, oh, I want to give that to you. Not, oh, I should, you know, be a good partner and go with you to the beach or whatever. So it's very much resonating for me that I feel much more at ease when I trust, and this is a big principle in NVC, I'm never going to give up on my needs. And I don't want you ever to give up on your needs. And needs are never in conflict. Conflict only happens on the level of strategy, which is particular ways of meeting needs. And that's a big distinction that we make in NVC, is between a need and one of the many ways, one of the many strategies of meeting the need. And we shift the focus from the what to do, from the particular strategy, to the deeper human need. So maybe we'll do this a bit as a role play of how we take that principle and bring it into dialogue and into communication. So I would love it if somebody would like to volunteer who would like the experience of being heard. Maybe you had some experience where you were not heard the way you want, or you're upset at somebody for something, and you get caught in this tug of war between, you know, both of you wanting to be heard or both blaming the other. Anybody have this experience and would like to have the experience of really being heard and understood? Natasha?
So I didn't understand if it was supposed we were going to a role play, or is it about to share our experience?
Yeah, I would love to do it with you as a role play where I step into the role of this other person. You can just tell us in one brief sentence who the other person is.
I should do that?
Yeah, and then I'll just step into that role and you can say to me what you usually say to them, but I'll be in their role as if they knew NVC, as if they knew our nonviolent
No,
communication.
I was just making the question because I didn't know exactly what you were asking to.
Got it.
Sorry, I didn't know. No, I was supposed that I could share also something before that, or we don't have time.
Something about that.
No, about what you were talking.
Yeah, you can share.
Yes, what I am completely in line with not 100, 200% of what you are saying, but what I found today in the world and in my relations, personal relations, business relations with everyone, is the time. No one has the time to care, and it takes much more time to understand the other and to try to find a way of communicate with non-violence. Nobody reads the things, care about the things, check the things. Everyone is doing things on a rush. So how is it possible to implement a non-violent communication? And before that, managing time for me is the most important issue, because when I try to start something with, okay, let's do it, let's stop, it's not the end of the world. We don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. The client is waiting, my son is there, my husband, it's every day.
So maybe let's do it like this. Let's step into a role.
So I was listening to you, but I want,
yeah, so would it be okay if we do it as a role play? Where you, and I just want to check, Sagara, if Natasha is being picked up on Instagram as well.
Me?
Or I think maybe not. So maybe Sagara.
I think I don't have Instagram.
Sorry, because we're doing it live on we're streaming live on Instagram, and then I was just worried that people aren't hearing your question. Yeah, okay, so let's not do it. Maybe Sagara, you and I will do this as a role play, if that works for you. And then people who are watching on Instagram, because it's anybody else know this experience of people not having time or not wanting to take the time, to actually have a real dialogue. So I would like to do this as a bit of a role play, just for a couple minutes, where Sagara, you step into the role of somebody who, like, I want to have a conversation with you, and you don't want to take the time.
Okay.
Okay, so Sagara and I will have that that dialogue. But I'll ask you to not do it as theater, but just to start in that role and then be a human being.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, Sagara, I would love to have this this dialogue. I would love to take a bit of time to speak about this thing which seems present, in our dynamic.
You mean now?
Are you worried that now is not a good time?
Well, not really. I've got so much going on,
Yeah, you've got a lot going on, and you're maybe feeling pressured, and
yeah, I'm feeling really pressured.
Yeah, and maybe worried that if we just get into it, it's just going to go on and on and on and on, and actually not lead to any kind of resolution.
Yeah, at the moment, that's how it feels. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe. Actually, can you let me share my screen while we're doing this?
Yeah.
Do you know how to do that?
Let me just, let me give you the powers.
Give me the
There you
power.
go.
Okay.
You've got the power.
Great. So I'll just pick that up. Okay. Yeah, maybe you're remembering a bunch of times in the past when we've had conversations and they haven't led to any kind of connection or clarity, and it's just been more frustration and maybe like blame and blame and blame, and you're not wanting that.
Yeah, I must say there is a bit of that fear, though. Come on, this is going to go on forever, and it never leads anywhere.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've got
And
other
you,
stuff to yeah, that I
yeah,
need to get going with.
yeah. You've got stuff. You've got like all your things to take care of, and you're wanting to spend your time in ways that are going to be meaningful and fruitful, and not frustrating and tiresome.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Yeah. So just a timeout for a second. This is really interesting what we're discovering here. It's not that he doesn't have time. It's that he's imagining based on past experience that this would be a waste of time or even worse. So that's already quite an interesting shift and very helpful. And you'll notice here that I've just been staying in the listening role. I'm letting Sagara express. He's throwing, and I'm just catching rather than jumping into what people usually do, which is arguing or or guilt tripping or trying to pressure him. And now we'll keep going, but just how is it for you so far being listened to in this way?
It did catch me a little bit by surprise to some extent, because I've done this before. But yeah, there's a side of me that goes, what?
Yeah,
it's not going in the direction that was expecting it to go.
Exactly. I'm doing something different. I'm not pushing back at all, which is weird because I want something which you're not agreeing to. So why am I not trying to yank you over and convince you to do what I want? Yeah. And so what I'm doing implicitly, and we'll keep going in a minute, but what I'm doing implicitly is creating safety. I'm implicitly validating your need and how it makes sense that you want to be spending your time in ways that make sense for you. And it makes sense that based on past experience, you wouldn't imagine this to be such a way. That is me holding your needs with care. And when you do that, my guess is, even though we haven't finished yet, my guess is maybe to some degree your nervous system is settling a bit and maybe semi-consciously perceiving, hey, this guy's not against me. That's what I'm going for in the stage 1 of dialogue. Okay, so if we pick that back up, yeah, you want to spend your time in meaningful ways. And the past times when we've tried to process things, that hasn't led to satisfying outcomes, is it?
Yeah, I guess so. And there's something about, I really kind of enjoy getting together with you, and I don't like it when it doesn't work. So yeah, and if I'm feeling pressured, I don't want to feel that sensation that we're not really connecting in a way, and I'd rather not do it sometimes.
So it's actually like you really value our connection and you want to experience it as nourishing and meaningful. And if we open this, this topic that like, oh, that might actually make you like less inclined to want to be together.
Yeah. And there's a fact, I am feeling pressured with other things.
Yeah.
So it's like this coming together of two things that are important, the things I've got to do, and our friendship, and feeling like I can't really take care of either of them that well because I'm feeling pressured.
Yeah. It's like also just a reality right now that you don't have as much spaciousness in your schedule as you would like, and a bit anxious about how that experience would be if we did open it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wonder, how would it be for you if we just took 20 minutes sometime in the next couple weeks, and knowing that my intention for that would be not to blame you, but actually to share a bit more from the heart what's up for me, and also to try and understand like what's in your heart in this particular area in our connection. And then after 20 minutes, we can stop and see, is that enough, or is there interest for continuing it more? How would that be for you?
I mean, yeah, no, that's fine. When you give that time frame, okay, yeah, 20 minutes within the next 2 weeks, I'll be completely in for that. I did notice a little something going in me, still kind of worried, what have I done, kind of thing. But yeah, I'm totally curious too.
Yeah. Is it like you're worried that like I'm thinking that you did something bad or wrong?
I think I have this irrational guilt in
Yeah.
all my relationships. Basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe wanting both care and stability in our relationship, and also to be seen and trusted in your intentions in the way you relate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's
yeah,
just wanting to be, well, loved, really.
Hmm.
Simple as that.
Hmm. Yeah, it quite touches me to hear that and to feel you in that, in the vulnerability. And for me, that's actually just what I'm wanting to explore, and it's just to be able to meet on that level where I can feel
Yeah.
you in that way and you can feel me in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I can feel something shifted.
Yeah.
Hearing you say that, something in me kind of relaxed and felt more trusting that whatever there is to be talked through, that yeah, I'm safe,
Yeah.
and that there is connection. And
Oh shit. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
I just saw a private chat that they couldn't hear us on Instagram, so we'll have to post because we've got the volume off. There's a warning for that.
Oh,
We'll have to post
oh.
the recording link on Instagram for those to
Hmm.
watch the. Or maybe that was with Natasha. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Thank you for that, Sagara. It's so amazing for me, even though this was a role play, to actually feel your heart, and to feel that quality of connection.
Likewise, I really felt heard and seen and cared for. So
Yeah. And that's exactly my intention. And maybe it's just a very brief role play demonstration, but maybe gives you a little glimpse of what's possible when we really go into the first stage of dialogue in these ways, where connection is not about agreement. It's about this deeper quality of empathic understanding on the level of human experience and universal human needs. So in the workshop in May, we have a whole weekend to go into each one of those steps that you saw on that chart, to practice, to see demonstrations, to have experiences, to really train the micro competencies that give you at least the foundations of a map and the practices that make this kind and way of connecting much more possible, rather than just a pipe dream. So I feel very excited. It's really, one of my favorite things about being alive is sharing this path and these practices, which I've been exploring for the past 12 years or so, with people, and seeing the impact that it has on people's lives in the moment, and especially over time as you train. So I'm amazed that we're now already at the end of our hour. And I would love it if you would like to write. Yeah, it would be so nice to have more time, right? Yes. Yeah, lovely to see that. I would love it if you would like to write in the chat a word of how are you now, a feeling word. And if you'd like something meaningful that you're taking from today, or something you're curious to learn more about. And of course, if you want to sign up for the workshop, then you can do that on the Upaya website. And Sagara, if you have anything to add about that, of course. Hope, connected, grateful, relaxed. Intimacy is into me, you see. Connected, open heart and joyful. Inspiration.
Danny?
Yes.
Hi, Danny. This is Jill, directly from Paris. I have a quick question. Is that possible?
Yes, it's a play.
I was just wondering if you could tell us in 1 minute, what is the reason your path of life brought you to do what you're doing today since the last 12 years.
Mm.
Did something happen in your life, a particular event, or is just a succession of different things? I want to understand a bit more the meaning and the sense for you.
Yes. So for those on Instagram, the question was, what in my life brought me to this path? I would say it was a succession. Originally, my twin brother told me about this thing, nonviolent communication. And I might say, you know, the experience which I had of him being born and leaving me in the womb created a strong first impression for separation, and then maybe a priming to explore a life path around what recreates that quality of connection that brings such a sense of wholeness. And I think also sensing and seeing more and more in the world the degree of alienation, of isolation, of separateness, and really an interest. It's a combination of seeing that and being in touch with a different possibility for humanity, for life on the planet, which is not all of the suffering and the adversity that we have. So there's a combination of healing and of the flowering and blossoming of intimacy and of giving. And I would just say, I feel like that's what I'm here for, is to participate in and to share and to co-create that and to enjoy that together. Does that speak to your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
very, very welcome. Thank you all. It's been just a highlight to be with you and to share with you and to see your reactions and to engage together. And I hope and look forward to more, hopefully in person in May.
Well, thank you very much, Danny. Thank you really very much for this lovely exchange. And it's such a beautiful prelude of what's to come in May. So I really hope that we see many of these. There's so many people here that are close to my heart. So it's lovely to see them here. And I'm overjoyed with the possibility that they will share this with you. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to more time with you and everyone else. So thank you very much.
Yeah, me too.
And on Insta, okay, people did hear us. There's
great.
It looks like there's plenty of smiley faces on Instagram as well.
Brilliant.
Which is great. Fantastic. Someone already asking if we're planning other dates. Well, I certainly hope so, but let's see.
Totally. It's just lovely to feel and to sense, and as we're saying goodbye, just to sense what's alive now, you know, in the body, in the heart, in the mind, in our shared space. To take time to let anything nourishing about that seep and soak in. A prelude of what's to come, inshallah. Don't want to end, huh? Everything starts with the first step.
In Portugal, we have a very flexible notion of time, you know.
Great, I love it. I love it. I'm happy to, you know, hang out if there are any sharings or questions or comments for another couple minutes. Sagara, does that work for you, or do you need to wrap up?
No, usually this slot goes on till 8:30. This is our weekly practice. So, you know, I'm here for as long as people are here.
Lovely. So is anybody like to say something? just be something of your experience of the past hour. It could be a question, a challenge.
Danny, did you see a question by Teresa Ranieri about safety on the chat and
Yes.
PTSD? I don't know if
Yes.
you want to touch that or...
Yeah, sure. I'll touch that. And then I saw Rita's hand, so we can come back to it. So the question, I'll read it here for everyone. Teresa wrote, safety is emerging from a regulated nervous system, sure. Yet what if a person is entangled in PTSD caused by trauma, with capital T or with small t? You need first to address that. Otherwise, without that inner work, any relationship will always crash against that wall sooner or later. So on the one hand, also as a trauma therapist, I very much resonate with that point, that doing the trauma integration work allows us to show up more from a place of safety, from a place of regulation in a relationship, so that we're in a what's called a social engagement system, the ventral vagal nervous system. We're showing up naturally on the lookout for safety rather than on the lookout for danger, or on the lookout and primed and available for connection rather than in our hypervigilance. So certainly that individual work is helpful. And I would say it can also go the other way around. Because many of our woundings happen in a relationship, there can be much healing, which also happens in a relationship, when we know how to facilitate that, when we know how to enable it. And that's actually a big part of why I frame and focus this approach so much in how do we create that quality of connection where bodies and hearts can relax together. How do we respond, even when somebody who's speaking to me out of their trauma, how can I catch them in a way where they feel heard and safe so that regulation lands? And the way that in NVC that we teach that is by focusing not on do I agree or disagree, do I think it's right or wrong or good or bad what you're saying, but learning to hear the beautiful and perhaps vulnerable human need that's underneath what you're saying. So for instance, Marshall Rosenberg, who developed nonviolent communication, he said that moralistic judgments are tragic expressions of unmet needs. So now let's say somebody out of their trauma is judging me. Now, maybe you would like to just offer, anybody like to offer a judgment of me? It can be a real judgment, that would probably be most fun. Or it can be a judgment that, you just want to hear, well, how could you respond to that? You can just open your mic and throw it at me. Or a judgment that you have of somebody else, or that somebody has of you. And how would you respond to that in a connecting way? This is trying to be as unspiritual as possible.
Okay, I'll do it. That's just a load of bullshit, because when we're really face to face, what comes out is anger and annoyance and the usual responses.
Yeah, you don't want bullshit. You want like something that's reliable and authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that's going to like really stand the test of real day-to-day relationships.
Yeah, but it never happens.
Yeah, and like in all of your experience so far, you haven't seen anything like what I'm talking about in real life.
No, it's just wishful, sort of hippie, rainbow, wishful thinking nonsense.
Yeah, like maybe it works in special hippie festivals, but if you're actually like, in business or in, intimate relationship, like, show me how to do it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work without a spliff.
Without a?
Without a spliff. Without a joint.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, like you need some chemical help to actually be able to relate in that way.
Yeah.
So now it's just beautiful, what Sagata is saying. It's not against me. He's just telling me how much he's longing for like the real deal, and in real life. And when I can hear that, not as a critique of me, but as him telling me about something that's precious and important to him, then just like, it's just very easy to travel with him into that space. And I'm not interested in convincing him. I'm interested perhaps in sharing something which has been meaningful for me, but I don't need to convince him. Any other judgments? Judgments might sound like you are, you're so self-centered, or you're out of touch with reality, or you're, selfish, or you're not seeing me. Anything like that. Okay. I'll share one. Because how many of you have self-judgments at times? The inner critic, anyone? Yeah. So I had this very interesting experience a couple of years ago. I had just come off about a month of meditation retreat. I was in England, and I was on the metro on the way to the airport, the underground. And I had said, okay, it's a good time for meditation. I've got an hour on the train. And I sat down. I spent a bit of time judging somebody else who was playing a video game for wasting their life. And then I was kind of moving into my meditation space. And then this guy sat down next to me with his smartphone, and he was watching some really interesting like Netflix series or whatever it was. And I had seen an ad for this, like in the subway station. I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And I just found myself, like glued to his, and he had subtitles on, so I could track it even though he had headphones. And I spent about 15 minutes basically watching TV, and during my meditation time, and until all of a sudden he got off, his stop. And he got off before we had finished. But anyway, he got off. And then in that moment, I was like, oh, shoot, I just spent 15 minutes watching TV when I had planned to be meditating. And actually what came up inside me was disgust, like disgust at myself. It was like this part of me which was disgusted, especially after I had judged that other person for playing her video game. And here I was watching TV instead of meditating. However, because I'm familiar with nonviolent communication, I know, or at least take the orientation, that every thought, every statement, every behavior is an attempt to meet or care for some basic human need, and that all needs are legitimate. So even behind judgment and critique, there's hiding. It's like a camouflage of some important and beautiful human need. So I just turned to this part the way I would turn to someone else saying it to me. And I just said, oh, something about that really didn't work for you, huh? And then inside the part was like, yeah. And then I just, okay, so first step of connection. And then I just said, do you want to share more about what it was? So rather than being in a struggle or trying to ignore it, trusting that there is some value there and creating safety with that part by inviting it more and inviting it to reveal what it is that matters. And not just meeting the surface content and agreeing, oh yeah, I'm such an idiot, I'm so bad. And then, so I said, yeah, and do you want to share more? And then what happened was that part revealed what it was carrying, the message that it was carrying by transforming into a radiant heart with a very clear message that it's possible to be alive with a radiant heart, and that your meditation practice is for that purpose, that you can be, that I can be alive with a radiant heart. And that part was, its initial disgust and the intensity of it was wanting me to not forget this very precious possibility of being alive and to care for that. And when I was in touch with that, instead of just being this like, oh, disgust or whatever, that I'm so bad or whatever, it was like, oh my gosh, what a helpful reminder. What a helpful remembrance to be put in touch with that preciousness and not just waste my time. And then we had a bit of a dialogue, me and this part, about more helpful ways of communicating that message than intense disgust. So we take this principle of needs, which is really a kind of spiritual practice, that there is actually one force which is animating life, and that force is trying to care for life. And then we look through that lens at what people are saying and what people are doing and what our inner voices are saying. And then we take away the garbled parts and we find what we can actually land with and connect with. So if I take that back to Therese's question, when somebody who has trauma comes and they're activated, they're in a defense state, yeah, and perhaps perceiving me, projecting onto me a threat. But when I meet them in this way, it's kind of like Aikido. It's like I meet them with the energy of their that they're coming, knowing that that intensity is trying to protect or care for something. And I give them the sense, the real and authentic sense, by walking with them into knowing what the need is. And when I land on the need, it's easy for me to be touched by it. And then to give them that sense that I hold with care what's important to them. And when I hold with care what's important to them, then they feel safe. And that is it's the opposite of trauma, is feeling safe. And feeling safe in connection and having choice, which is also a big thing in NVC. And also this practice that I'm never going to ask you to do something which isn't in line with your needs to do. That's also restoring choice, which was often lacking. Or this, I'm not asking for the either me or you, also part of trauma. I'm going for the both and. So in these various ways, I'm moving towards creating the quality of connection and the quality of relationship, which either then to begin with doesn't need the self-protection because there's no threat, or it's healing actually, and providing the missing experience which the trauma was based on. So that's my my response for Therese's question. Therese, I wonder if you have any follow-up or input hearing that?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, one of the partners has to be very skilled in navigating that.
Yeah, I agree. One of the partners needs to be very skilled in navigating that. And I appreciate also that you say one, because oftentimes people say, oh, but it takes two people. And it's usually the other person who's the problem, right? So it's actually quite empowering to know that if you are holding the intention to hold everybody's needs with care, and if you have some skillfulness in knowing how, when people are showing how to catch, then just, you know, you can bring that coherence and that safety. And depending on how much trauma the other person is showing up with and how much trust or wound or hurt is in the relationship, you know, you may be able to support something here there.
Somewhere we get, you know, it seems like it is a loop. That skillfulness is emanating from you being, you know, how you say that, worked on your personal trauma, so that you are that vessel, that container that can hold the trauma of the other person. So it's we go back to square one. It's about you working your personal traumas, and then you can handle the one of others.
Yeah, I very much resonate with that, and that is my personal path and practice, is to do that personal integration work and the relational training, so that, you know, more and more I can show up in that way.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry, Danny, if I can ask you something very quickly, just going back to what Teresa was saying, and I jumped into the conversation a bit later on. I was on Instagram, but I couldn't hear everything that was going on, so I then came on the Zoom. So when do you know that it's enough? Like when you are in those relationships and, you know, you do put in the effort and the intention, you have your heart open, you carry the weight and the aggression that most of the times can come out, you try to work with it your best that you can. And as Teresa was saying, you know, you have to be very skilled in this because it's definitely not something easy to do. It becomes harder if you're always, as Teresa was saying, in that loop. You keep finding yourself there, and no matter how much effort and care you take, no matter how good your intention, I think my question is a little bit like, when do you get to that point? If maybe at that moment you can soften the blow a little bit, but then, you know, you keep getting back into that because the other person isn't practicing that nonviolent communication with you. So even if you are structured, because it takes a very structured person to have that kind of approach in a conversation, that kind of discernment and capacity to, while you're hearing, break it down and have the compassion and understand, okay, well, maybe this is coming from here, let my reaction be this. It gets to a point, and I think that this is the biggest problem when we talk about professional relationships or friendships or intimate relationships, that it gets to a point where you're like, okay, you know, like, when is it enough? When you know, and well, it's never enough, but at one point,
check if I'm getting it?
Excuse me?
Can I just check if I'm getting you?
Yes.
So is it like when you feel like, you know, time and time again, you've really tried and you've done everything that you know to do, and you feel like you're just stuck being on the receiving end of, you know, very unpleasant ways of relating, and then wondering, maybe, how do I know if I've done everything that I can, and how, at what point do I just choose peace and ease by exiting this relationship?
Yes, or not necessarily exiting a relationship. Imagine it's a professional relationship. Imagine you just disengage.
Yeah.
You know, you don't put that time in, because the time is your luxury in life, right? Giving your time is an act of love. And every time you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to really sit, be present, listen, open your heart, be receptive, that's moments you'll never get back in your life, because that's basically the one asset that you have that once it runs out, you never get more of it, right? Yeah. So when do you decide to disengage?
Yeah, so you want to be really at choice in what you're doing with your precious time, and knowing that that's really in service of the life that you want to be living.
And that it's having the effect on the other person as well, because it's not only about you. It's like, if you feel that you are not actively managing to get to that, you know, to that place with that person, then you're going to continue in this loop, which was the word that was used. And it's, I think many people sometimes feel like in a rut or in a loop.
Yeah.
And, you know, because the way you speak about nonviolent communication, it's almost like we have this endless capacity to hold it all. But we have limited capacities, and we all have lives, and we all have difficulties. We all have, you know, a certain amount of time for everything, you know, and it gets a lot.
Yeah, it's like, actually, Danny, we have limited capacity, and I want to be really intentional about what I'm doing with my limited capacity of time and energy.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, well, I certainly resonate with that. And there's two things that I would say, or three things. One is that for me in an NVC, there's a shift away from any kind of have to or should. I should keep trying more, or I have to stay in this relationship. And a shift towards looking to what is serving needs, what is serving life. So that's one thing. Another thing, and then perhaps to see it at some point, you know, this relationship, having tried everything I know to try, is actually, it's not serving my needs. It's not meeting my needs to continue being in it, or being it in this way. And then by all means, to be in touch. And this is part of the shift to agency and empowerment out of powerlessness, is actually, I have a choice about whether to continue in this relationship. And I don't have to. And that can be quite liberating. Realizing that continuing this relationship is just one strategy, and especially if it's not working, then I might choose otherwise. That can be very liberating, and I very much support that. The other thing I would say is that, unfortunately, most people think I have to do this all by myself. And I want to live in a world where there is an abundance of support. So if you and I are in a conflict or in a loop that we're not getting out of, and apparently we're stuck in that, then I would love to just be able to turn to our friend Sagara and say, hey, Sagara, can you help us in this stuck place that we're in? And there is that, you know, format of like NVC-based mediation, where we bring in somebody who has a skillfulness to help us out of our loop. And usually, unfortunately, the threshold for doing that is like only when it's about like divorce or some, I don't know, geopolitical conflict, as opposed to an everyday thing with people throughout the community who are trained and skilled and interested in supporting that. So that's definitely the world that I'm interested in moving towards, and have normalized also for myself, interest in supporting others and in being supported where needed. And then having tried that to the extent that I am interested in expending energy, at times also saying, yeah, this relationship is not actually a place that I want to be investing energy. So I'm really, a big part of this practice in NVC is, what do I want? Is that at all speaking to your question, Tatiana?
It does. It's just that you were speaking about the inner critic, you know, and I think that most people have that. Most people have that really big difficulty of knowing when is enough, when is it okay to feel like you don't want that anymore, you know, because,
yeah,
well, basically that.
Yeah. And the one thing which can help with that, you know, one of the things I love in NVC is what we call mourning. Mourning means like the holding of the tender and poignant space for when a need is not being met or hasn't been met, or in the ways that we wish. And that can help us also in the transition out of certain ways of being or certain relationships, is to hold space for the mourning, for the sadness, for the sense of loss, for the dreams or the wishes that weren't fulfilled or weren't fulfilled in the way that we wish. And it's a way of actually validating the needs. So the inner critic might be coming up, you know, saying, oh, you should have been better. You should have figured out a way to make that work. And then I can hear with tenderness and poignancy the sense of loss, of not having found that. That's a very helpful way of being imperfect.
It's a good word. Imperfect. Thank you.
So I have a question. So the V in NVC means violence, and often violence comes from deep insecurities or emotion or intimacy within you. And I understand the thing about the need, and it really resonates what you say about that. But how do you deal with violence?
So
with the violence part that is triggered, because basically it's triggered once a problem comes, and it's often the primary reaction to where you want to go. So how do you manage to dance with that violence and to get to your needs?
So it's a big and important question. And if we have more time, I would love to do it as a role play, but since we have just 1 minute, I'll just respond briefly. In NVC, we understand violence as a tragic response to unmet needs. It's a tragic resort that the person feels that, oh, my needs are so vulnerable, and the only way I know, based on what's alive in my nervous system and my cultural conditioning and models, is to act out in this way. But in a sense, it's like Dominique Barter, who started these restorative justice circles all over the world. He says violence is actually feedback. It's feedback about something that's not working in the system. So we can take it as feedback about needs that are not being met and go straight to that. So I'll give you a small example. I was sitting just outside my house on the deck with a friend in the evening. We were speaking at a volume about like this. And all of a sudden, my neighbor comes running up the stairs from downstairs, and he says, either you tone it down or I'm going to take you down.
I like your neighbor.
Very uninhibited. So there's a bit of violence for you, big threat, big clear threat. No hello, just that's jumping into it. And then I was a bit confused, I was like, oh, you heard us downstairs? So basically he's throwing, I'm just going into catching, right? Like the Aikido master, he's coming at me. I'm finding, how do I join with his energy and find the way to minimize the damage? hear the way you move the chairs. And he said, and I said, oh, okay, you heard the chairs. And yeah, and my parents don't understand. His parents are my landlords who live next door. And I said, oh, they don't understand, and that pisses you off, you know, something like that. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, thank you so much for telling me that it's making noise, because I really want to be considerate and I want to support the quiet. And, you know, it just like and there were probably like 3 or 4 or 5 things that he said. And I just reflected to give him the sense of, yes, I understand, I hear you, but not by saying I hear you, but actually telling him what I hear so it can land and he can trust, oh, I get what's important to him. And just in my authenticity, oh, I didn't realize that was disturbing. I actually do want to support the quiet so she can put the baby to sleep. And then within 2 minutes of just responding in that way, it was like each time I responded, his volume went down a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And then he just said, thank you. And he went downstairs and that was it. So what basically happened, he was in fight mode because he was perceiving a threat. And what I did was meet him in a way to show him I am no threat. And what's vulnerable and important to you, I'm holding that with care. And then automatically the nervous system will downregulate because there's no threat. And that only comes online when threat is being perceived. So that's the very brief response to your question, John.
Yeah, it didn't really answer my question, but okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I would love to have more time if you come to a workshop, or if you write me an email, then maybe we can have more time.
No, but I understand, like the guy came with because his needs were to be quiet, so he just basically came to violence with you. But I was more speaking, and maybe we'll get the chance to speak later, but the primary reaction when you feel that your needs are not met, and that's just what you started with, which what I thought was very interesting, what you primarily said to my question, is that when you found yourself in that situation, the first activation that you might get within your body is that violence. And
yeah, it could be. I think I
could be.
You're saying like when your needs are not being met, what can you do about it?
No, it's just like violence in this non-violence thing. Like there's a process where when you get into your deep intimacy and emotions, violence comes from the fact that they are not respected. It could be a primary reaction.
I would say it doesn't come from that my needs are not being respected. It comes from how I'm socialized to respond when my needs are not being met.
Yeah, but that's exactly my question. It's like, what is the path between this primary reaction towards getting to nonviolent communication? And like this violence component is the one that I'm interested with. It's not saying like the display of violence, because we don't care about this, because this is not what you should be doing. But like, what is the path? What is the path between your primary reaction and your subconscious reaction to how am I gonna, put it out of my mouth? What is the path and what is the road? This is what I was trying to say.
So this is the path. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
So this is the path. What you're talking about calls for self-connection, moving out of what we call the jackal mode, the aggressive, the life alienating, that mode, into self-connection, actually getting clear what happened and what are my thoughts and interpretations around what happened, what's happening in my body, and what are my needs. Most of us are not educated into being in touch with ourselves in this way. We go right into what's wrong with you rather than what's happening in me, and how to communicate that in a way which will put you in touch with my human experience that stimulates your care rather than your defensiveness or counterattack. So that's what I'm doing. I'm training. This is our training, and then it takes a relearning, learning these steps of seeing just what happened and learning feelings. Most of us aren't taught in school the names of different feelings. We're taught fake feelings like attacked and criticized and ignored and belittled, and all of those things are what I think you're doing to me, rather than sad and despairing and disheartened and longing for connection, and mattering and being seen. And I need to learn how to recognize that and be in touch with it in myself, and then how to communicate it to you in a way which will touch you, and then arouse your caring responsiveness. And then once I do that regularly, I start to have the sense of, oh, I can just tell you my experience, and that can arouse care rather than needing to be violent. But that'll be a new experience. So that's a brief overview of the steps I would take.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for that question. Okay, so thanks for hanging out, everybody, and for your engaged questions. I look forward to having much more time to actually explore and practice and take these steps one by one and put them together. Yeah. Wishing you well.